My husband kicked me out and forced me to move in my 1-month-old affair instead of listening to me. Hey Reddit, I'm back with an update. If you thought my first post was chaotic, buckle up because the fallout has been nothing short of catastrophic. I thought hitting rock bottom would at least bring some clarity, but I've realized there's always room to sink lower. Here's where things stand now. For those who didn't catch my last post, my name is Lisa. I'm 25, and my husband Fred is 26. After 2 years of marriage and a relationship that started in high school, I found myself tangled in an affair with Kai, a personal trainer I met at the gym. Things spiraled out of control when Fred caught us red-handed. After Fred walked out that night, I felt like my entire world crumbled. I stayed up all night waiting for him to come back, but he never did. Every hour felt like an eternity. I tried texting and calling him countless times, but he left me on read. By morning, I knew he wasn't coming back anytime soon, so I decided to take matters into my own hands and went to his office. When I arrived, Fred wasn't there, but his assistant, who usually greeted me warmly, was cold and distant. She told me Fred was busy and wouldn't be available for the rest of the day. I left feeling humiliated and confused. The confrontation that evening, Fred finally came home, but not alone. He brought a lawyer with him. It was the most surreal moment of my life. He handed me divorce papers and explained, in that same unnervingly calm tone, that he had been planning this for weeks. Apparently, Fred had known about my affair for a while. He hired a private investigator to gather evidence, including photos and text messages between Kai and me. He said he didn't want to act impulsively and had taken his time to ensure he had everything he needed to protect himself legally. Fred told me he had already moved his belongings to a temporary apartment and wanted me out of the house by the end of the week. I was in shock. My once dutiful, quiet husband was now a stranger, cold, calculated, and determined. Kai's true colors, with nowhere else to go, I turned to Kai. I explained the situation, hoping he'd offer me some kind of stability. Instead, Kai's response was a slap in the face. He told me bluntly that he wasn't ready for a serious commitment and certainly didn't want to play house with me full-time. He said he enjoyed our fun, but the reality of being with me, especially without Fred's financial safety net, wasn't what he had signed up for. To make matters worse, Kai admitted he had been seeing other women on the side. He claimed he never expected me to take our fling so seriously and accused me of being too much drama. The betrayal stung more than I expected. I'd thrown away my marriage for someone who couldn't care less about me. The fallout after that conversation, I had no choice but to crash at a friend's place. But the shame of explaining my situation to her was almost unbearable. Most of my friends sided with Fred and either ghosted me or sent me messages expressing their disappointment. Even my own parents, who were initially supportive, were furious when they learned the full story. Fred, meanwhile, wasted no time moving on. He unfollowed me on all social media and changed his status to single. I later found out through mutual friends that he'd been attending therapy and focusing on self-improvement. He even rejoined the gym and started reconnecting with old friends. Meanwhile, I'm struggling to pick up the pieces of my life. Without Fred's financial support, I'm scrambling to find a job, but my lack of work experience has made it nearly impossible. I tried reaching out to Fred to apologize and ask for another chance, but he made it clear that he's done with me. Self-reflection looking back, I can see how much I took Fred for granted. I let my own insecurities and boredom cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I destroyed the one relationship that truly mattered. Fred wasn't perfect. He worked long hours and sometimes neglected our emotional connection, but he was a good man. He didn't deserve what I did to him. As for Kai, I've learned the hard way that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. What seemed like excitement and passion turned out to be shallow and fleeting. I was chasing a fantasy, and in the process, I lost everything real in my life. What now? I'm still figuring out where to go from here. I've started therapy to unpack my actions and understand why I made the choices I did. It's not an easy process, but it's a necessary one. I know I need to rebuild my life from the ground up, and that starts with taking accountability for my mistakes. Fred deserves better, and while I can't undo the pain I've caused him, I hope he finds happiness and healing. As for me, I'm determined to learn from this experience and never repeat these mistakes. To anyone reading this, thank you for taking the time to listen. If you've been through something similar or have advice on how to move forward, I'd love to hear from you. Reflection and growth. After posting this, I spent hours reading through the comments. Some were harsh, but many were insightful and honest. I realized just how much I had let my own insecurities and sense of entitlement drive my actions. One commenter said something that really stuck with me. You didn't just betray Fred, you betrayed yourself. You had an opportunity to communicate and grow together, but instead, you chose the easy way out. That hit hard because it was true. I'd taken the path of least resistance, avoiding the uncomfortable but necessary conversations that might have saved my marriage. Another commenter suggested writing a letter to Fred, not to ask for reconciliation, but to offer a sincere apology. I've started drafting that letter, and while I don't know if I'll ever send it, the process has been cathartic. Moving forward, I've also started looking into community college programs to gain some marketable skills. I know it's a small step, but it feels like the right direction. For now, my focus is on rebuilding my independence and learning to be okay on my own. Fred, if you ever come across this post, I'm sorry for everything. I know words can't undo the damage I've done, but I want you to know that I'm working on becoming a better person, not for you, but because I owe it to myself to do better. Thank you, Reddit, for giving me the space to share my story and for holding me accountable. It's been a hard, humbling journey, but I'm determined to come out of this stronger and wiser. The next morning, Fred returned home. His silence was deafening, filling every corner of the room with unspoken anger. When he finally spoke, his words struck like a punch to the gut, sharp and unrelenting. He asked, in a tone colder than I'd ever heard before, if I'd packed my things. It was clear there was no going back. He had made up his mind. "We're getting divorced," he said bluntly. His next words stung even more. "I can't forgive you. Pack up and go live with your boyfriend." It felt like the ground beneath me crumbled. I broke down, tears streaming uncontrollably, as I begged Fred for another chance. I pleaded with him, clinging to the hope that he'd reconsider. But Fred was resolute. He stood there, arms crossed, his face a mask of hurt and determination. Deep down, I knew I wasn't just afraid of losing Fred. I was terrified of losing the life we had built together, the comfortable home, the stability, the luxuries. It was a life I had grown used to, and the thought of stepping into the unknown with Kai, a man whose financial situation I barely understood, filled me with dread. Fred, however, left no room for negotiation. He made it clear he'd call the police if I didn't leave voluntarily. My heart sank. I had no choice but to pack my belongings. He refused to let me take the car he'd bought me, or even the jewelry he'd once gifted me with love. As I stuffed my clothes into bags, reality hit me hard. I had nothing of my own, no savings, and no place to go. Reluctantly, I reached out to Kai. He agreed to pick me up and let me stay with him, but his tone over the phone was far from reassuring. As I waited on the porch for him to arrive, my emotions were a chaotic mix of relief and dread. Now here's where I need advice. Can I fight for the house in the divorce? Fred earns significantly more than I ever did, and I can't help but feel I'm entitled to something given our years together. If anyone has been through something similar or knows the legal ins and outs, please share your insights. I understand this situation is messy and emotions are running high. I'm doing my best to navigate through it, but some of the comments have been harsh. Constructive advice is what I need most right now. If you can't offer that, please don't add fuel to the fire. Thanks for taking the time to read. Update #1 Reddit. I'm back. It's been an emotional roller coaster since I left Fred's house, and writing here feels oddly therapeutic. The negative comments and DMs? Not exactly fun, but this space has become a way for me to process everything almost like a blog. Surprisingly, a week has passed, and I haven't heard from friends or family. I half expected my phone to be blowing up if Fred had told them about the situation, but silence. I'm taking it as a sign that he's kept things quiet, though I haven't dared to call anyone to confirm. As for my new living arrangement with Kai, it's far from what I envisioned. The apartment is small and in desperate need of repairs. The wallpaper is peeling, the furniture is mismatched, and the heating barely works. I try to remind myself that it's temporary, but it's hard to stay optimistic when the conditions are so bleak. To make matters worse, Kai's roommate turned out to be his ex-girlfriend. They claim it's purely financial. Neither of them can afford the place alone, but it's an uncomfortable situation for me. I'm doing my best to adjust, but it's far from ideal. Fred messaged me to say I'd be served with divorce papers soon, which I expected. Still, seeing those words written out felt like a blow. It's hard to accept how quickly my life has unraveled. Update #2. It's been a month since my last update, and to be honest, things have gone from bad to worse. The online criticism has intensified, spilling over to TikTok and other platforms. It feels like I'm being attacked from all sides. People don't seem to understand my perspective. Yes, Fred worked hard for everything we had, but does that mean I don't deserve anything? Am I not entitled to some empathy? The negativity got so overwhelming that I took a week-long break from social media to clear my head. During that time, I started job hunting, a huge shift for someone who's never had to work before. It hasn't been easy. Kai and I have had arguments about it, but he insists this is just a temporary situation. Following Reddit's advice, I hired a lawyer. Unfortunately, we don't live in a no-fault state, meaning my infidelity has serious consequences for the divorce settlement. Things took a turn for the worse when Fred presented video evidence of my cheating footage he'd captured using hidden cameras. I wasn't prepared for that. In court, I denied everything, not knowing the footage existed. It backfired terribly. The judge ruled in Fred's favor. I walked away with almost nothing, just enough to cover my lawyer's fees. The house, the car, the life I had known, gone. Update #3. After the court proceedings, things spiraled further downhill. I discovered that Kai's ex wasn't actually his ex. She was still his girlfriend. They admitted they had been using me, assuming I'd walk away from the divorce with a significant settlement. It was a cruel revelation, especially when I realized that much of the money I had given Kai during my marriage had likely been spent on her. Now that I have nothing, Kai sees me as a burden. He's made it clear that I can only stay temporarily. The atmosphere in the apartment is unbearable. They've stopped pretending to hide their relationship and are openly affectionate in front of me. It's humiliating. I feel trapped. I need money to move out and start fresh, but I don't know where to turn. Should I swallow my pride and ask Fred for help? Reach out to my family, even though I know they'll side with him? Or do I start something like a GoFundMe and hope for the best? I feel lost and overwhelmed. Final update: this will likely be my last post. After the divorce, Fred blocked me on all platforms. He only unblocked me once to mock me by sharing my Reddit post before blocking me again. Desperate, I showed up at his workplace to ask for help. He looked at me with a mix of pity and contempt. "This is karma," he said coldly. "Deal with it." Those words have haunted me ever since. My family offered me a temporary place to stay, but they made it clear they support Fred in this situation. They won't let me end up on the streets, but their support is minimal, and their disappointment in me is palpable. I know now that I can't sue Fred or the judge. I was venting in anger when I mentioned it before. The truth is, I've burned too many bridges, and now I'm facing the consequences. To everyone who mocked me, congratulations, you've won. I never imagined my life would fall apart so completely. I'll miss having this space to share my thoughts, but I won't miss the cruelty. Goodbye, Reddit.